They tore down the grandstand at Hollywood Park 3 weeks after my father died. They tore it down to make room for one of those retail, performance, sports, mixed-use bullshit plazas that you go to on a Sunday and forget about immediately. And we used to go there as kids, my brother and I, with our dad. And it was just like a day in the sun. We felt warm, we felt safe, and all the horrible things that had happened, the violence, the orphanage, the coke, all those endless nights alone just disappeared. Because we were just out of the day in this shady-ass place, Hollywood Park, with our dad, laying bets and eating roast beef sandwiches. And they tore it down 3 weeks after he died. And it just felt like a tear in the sky. It felt like the sky opened up and it swallowed it whole. And I remember this row of yellow excavators, and they were standing on the side, and they had their buckets out with those fangs and those claws, and they were tearing at it. And this great big cloud of smoke rose up, and it just felt like we don't have a home anymore. And it left with all these questions. And so many things seem like that to me now, these intricate, wondrous structures that disappear and over time become these intricate, wondrous memories. Like there's a place in your mind you can visit where you could just be a kid again. And they took that from us. And sometimes you think, I'm gonna live forever, and sometimes you think I'm gonna die tonight. And you wonder, is this something that happened to us? Or is this something that's gonna happen to everyone?
Without the artist, there can be no artisan. Without the artisan, there can be no artist. Modernist and postmodernist architecture is dead. The levee is dry. The monuments of utopian dreams have been painted over in the mind of civilization, with the fueling stations and retail compounds now disposed of just as bloodlessly. Modernism must be recovered from mediocrity. It must be wrenched up from the grave dug by the reaction of the powers that be. It must be set out on display, a public reckoning for the criminality of the building. The message must be preserved. In a world where the reactionary refuses to cease, where the words of the Lord have been twisted into knives of terror, and where the definition of neighbor is subject to anyone's whim. The Museum of the Rejected Building is a shelter to the transparent. Rising from the ashes of the arson of progress, it will be built into the solid rock where no floodwaters shall break it. The ruins of shattered monuments and the art of those living on will be exhibited hand in hand, giving a home to the new guild of crafters and dreamers. My museum project is located in the Southfield, city of Southfield in the Detroit metro area. The reason I chose it is specifically because of the density in the United States. The Detroit area is home to some of the densest heritage of modernist architecture, and it felt like a fitting home. It's only why the building that I chose to build my building out of. Zooming into the site, you can see on the site model too, if you're in the front row, I suppose. Hey, on the site model, so you can see it's built. I'll get to the building's built out of in a moment and the significance of that. But you can see it's built next to the sunken M10 Lodge Freeway. But other than that, largely a flat site. There's a 4-lane service drive that comes around here, provides access to both parking bays, being both the staff parking and the main patron parking, as well as the loading dock at the north end of the patron parking. So my building is part restoration slash adaptive reuse, and as well as an addition. The existing building is the Reynolds Metals Regional Sales Office, which was built in 1969 and was designed by Minoru Yamasaki, one of the leading modernist architects to come out of the Detroit area, again building off of that significance. And the reason I chose this building in particular is because in the late 80s it was sold to a gym chain and then drastically altered in order to serve a gym purpose. Just comparing the atrium back then in this Balthazar Korab photo with this picture that was taken about 4 years ago of the pool that was built in that atrium with a ceiling put over it. And as you can see in these two photos, in the last 10 years, it's just been basically left to rot. So the idea of actively living out the museum's mission of restoring modernist architecture and advocating for its preservation, being lived out in the museum. I was looking a lot at architectural precedents. It was only logical to base it off of modernist, postmodernist architecture. One of the main influences is the Denmark's National Bank in Copenhagen, which is essentially the federal bank of Denmark, National Bank of Denmark, however you put it, which was designed and built in the 70s by Arne Jacobsen, who is a local modernist architect who did a lot of significant work in Denmark, and he actually shows up again towards the end, so remember that name. But then just little moments here and there, you'll see influence of this 2001 art museum located in Cologne, Germany. You'll see influences even of the Saturn V display at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. So talking specifically on the exhibits that would be exhibited at the museum, it's essentially a two-part program. Whereas the museum itself would host a permanent collection of building artifacts of lost modernist and postmodernist architecture, both artifacts of actually destroyed buildings, like materials from the building, as well as just anything related to that idea, be it image prints, that sort of thing. But then secondly, there's smaller gallery spaces throughout the museum, and those are intended to support traveling exhibitions, temporary exhibitions. Some of them more closely related to the idea of the museum is advocating for preservation of art and architecture, but really it's more of a home. It's designed to be a home just for, in general, advocating for viewing the role of artist as messenger. That was at the core of it. It was the core idea behind a lot of the influential art movements that developed into modernist architecture. So now you can see the actual building. So starting here at the ground level, we'll progress up and then we'll progress down, as you'll see in a moment. So starting here at the ground level, you'll notice the extant Reynolds building, which is essentially this square here bounded by the reflecting pool. So you would enter from the west there as a patron, and then you would progress past the ticketing into the main atrium lobby space, which as part of the restoration will be opened back up, but back to its original state, essentially. Modified slightly to accommodate the floor plan, but material-wise, state-wise, it would be restored. And then you would progress north through this very kind of low ceiling. There's a lot of low ceilings that you see in the section plan, but so through this low ceilinged, almost square proportion corridor, bounded by curtain walls, and then on either side there would be more reflecting pool. So again, you have two states already of transitioning through a piece of water. One when you enter the building, and then again as you progress from the existing building into the addition, which is where most of the gallery spaces are. Which comes to mind the whole reason that the reflecting pool was installed in the first place is in a lot of Yamasaki architecture relating to the idea of water, a very calming, almost purifying tool. And then on the north end there is the main primary above ground addition, which constitutes a large majority of the vault space as well as the loading dock for handling building materials. And then also the logistics offices are located by the loading dock with the idea that would enable more efficient management of building, not necessarily building services, but building artifacts that are stored in the building. So then first progressing up into the second floor, there are no floors in the addition above the first floor. You can see it's largely just open space in order to accommodate large artifacts. In restoring the office spaces of the existing building, we shift floor plans around slightly to accommodate on the second floor what would be essentially auxiliary guest services. So there's a library for research, 4 different education/event rooms, the security office, And then, again, following the same idea as expressed in the above ground edition, the education, or as I call it, the inspiration offices, because that's what the goal is it's outreach for inspiration and recognition of science and technology. So the 2 inspiration offices would also be located on this floor. And then the 3rd floor is solely museum administration. Again, restoring back to the original idea of the original state of the building as an office building. So now we progress underground. So programmatically, most of the, like I said, most of the building spaces are actually underground. This was done for very pragmatic reasons because of the size of the site and having to retain the parking, as well as not obscure the existing building too much. But also just for the experiential purpose of the fact that you're going underground, so it feels like very protected, very secure. So as you would progress through that glass corridor, you would then descend down this grand staircase or the elevator. So then going out to the basement floor, there's actually not a lot of floor area because that double height gallery, and a secondary vault space are all double height. And you'll notice it actually connects to the basement of the existing building. However, because the existing building is located 4 feet above grade, the first floor is located 4 feet above grade, that leads to a 4-foot difference between, just how the math worked out, because it was a puzzle trying to fit this together, it leads to a 4-foot difference between the first basement level and the existing basement level. So that was an interesting thing to try to figure out. And you'll notice in the existing building, it's actually largely like back of house stuff, the mechanical room, the electrical information technology room, as well as a auditorium that you'll see, which is intended to host both, like meeting events, but also maybe even concerts, punk rock shows, that sort of thing. Again, exemplifying like artist and artisan being one, fine and applied arts together. Just a couple more small moments to point out. So the preservation clean room is located down here. The reason it's separated from everything else is largely down to access for the public, should it need be, as well as also being right next to the research room. Which the reason I decided to include that was actually inspired by the fact that being able to research the existing building through archival tools, as well as other buildings related to my capstone project through archival tools, I felt like it was almost paying back to be able to have a similar access room in here. So then the second basement level, which is 30 feet below grade, so that is where most of the actual floor space for the exhibition is. And so you can see the 2 double height galleries, which is intended to, that's intended to be largely the home of the permanent collection of the museum. There's a secondary vault space as well for additional storage. There's a single-story large gallery for large scale traveling exhibits, and 3 more small galleries, again with the traveling exhibits. And you'll notice the different arrangement of the partitions in there. The idea with the partitions in the small gallery is that they're actually removable based on the 5 and 10 foot grade system established in the existing building. So they're essentially inserted to the floor and rotate and be able to be moved in and out, shifted to create all sorts of different arrangements. So then moving into the section codes, you can start to see the puzzle play. Structurally, I want to point out the additional floor plan over on the north side is spanned by steel trusses. And then you can see here to allow natural light, to a very dim natural light to enter this double height gallery. There's a slot here that comes in, and then the light would be able to fade in through there. And then showing off the grand staircase, you can see it's arranged by these skylight tubes at each landing, which allows natural light to come into both there as well as the reflecting bullets on the bottom. And then so you can see now what I was talking about the puzzle of having to fit the basement levels together, which creates a very differentiated spatial experience between the existing and the new building. And so more skylight details there in these 2 boxes that cut through the preservation wing with the curtain wall surrounding it and then let out into the gallery that's underneath. In the subsections, you can see the double height gallery that's located in the north addition, has the sawtooth ceiling. And then another spatial arrangement showing both buildings together. So talking about the materials, so the main primary load-bearing structural material for the addition of the building is a massive pre-cut stone, which isn't used essentially anywhere in the United States. But as the name implies, it's just large format stone masonry which is a lot more environmentally friendly, like less impactful, would be a better way to put it. It's less environmentally impactful in concrete when sourced locally. So this would be limestone that's sourced from northern Michigan areas like the Rider City deposit. So that would be cut and it would be used as the primary load-bearing structure, and then just standard precast concrete for the lengthwise spans you can see in a bit. So then to contrast that, inspired by a lot of the Guathney Siegel postmodern architecture in the 90s and 2000s they were putting out. So we used a lot of like lacquered oak plywood for the furnishings. It's very liberally used, I should say, for the furnishings, for light fixtures, just pretty much almost anywhere wood. And then that's tied in with that, wherever you'll see that, as well as in the ceilings, is this darker, currently unassigned to a specific species, with this darker wood variety to contrast that. And then the wood, the floor is made out of oak wood again. However, it's arranged in this 1 foot by 1 foot grid of alternating sets of 5 oak blocks. And so one of the main primary visual things of the existing building is obviously the gold-plated aluminum sunscreen. And the reason there's so much aluminum is because the original client was the Reynolds Aluminum Company. So Yamasaki, being seeking to integrate their work with the architecture, used aluminum very liberally throughout the space. So kind of paying back to that would be brass for cost reasons, but paying back to that, the rings actually show up at a couple different points in the existing building, as you'll see. So now progressing into some three-dimensional spaces, I have 2 sets of the front entrance, both day and night. So you can see essentially what the first view of the building would be, as well as, so you can see it's very, from this side it's very open, it's not really obscured at all. Again, the only above ground change you can really tell is on the north side, the addition. So then you progress into the atrium space, and you can see, if you can compare this with the picture from earlier, you can see it's largely been restored to its original state, albeit with some of the opaque walls of the core brought out this way for experiential reasons as you would progress through the opaque space and then again into the clear space you'll see in the next slide. You may notice one thing that changed is that I did retain when it was converted to a gym, they brought the curtain wall on the ground floor out to meet the second and third floor curtain wall. I did retain that for floor area reasons, to be able to fit everything in programmatically. However, I did replace most of it with transparent glass, except for around the bathrooms. So restoring it to the transparent state. So then this is the view from the reflecting pool. You can see, so again, where those rings come into play, those are the exhaust stacks for the mechanical room that's located underneath. So integrating the practical concerns of the building with the artistic side. And you can notice how the progression would go. You would enter through here and you would hang a hard right down the staircase or a hard left into the passenger elevator just beyond there. So we have the small galleries. You can see that grid system that's inspired by the museum in Cologne in 2001 and the rotating oak exhibits as well. And we have the collection galleries, the permanent collection galleries. Pay attention to these pendant lights. Those will come back into play in a little bit as I talk about thinking about the building as a toll house. So you can see just kind of throwing things at the wall and see what sticks, if you would, of permanent collections of what the building would have of replicas of modernist architecture that was at one point threatened and now seems to be less so, thankfully. And then, in memoriam pictures, the Zimmerman House, Craig Elwood, that was actually just last week that was taken down. Oh boy, don't tell me about it. This render is pretty untouched, as you can see, but so this is just giving an idea of what the auditorium would feel like in more of a show setting instead of a meeting setting. So this is the reflecting pool that's under the staircase. Under the grand staircase. You can see again the pendant lights, which we'll talk to in a moment, as well as the bottom of these skylights. And the idea isn't that they would bring in a practical amount of natural light, but more so just like a small ambience that would be noticeable.